All right, so thank you guys. Glad we're back. Ray was awesome, and it's a perfect lead-in to what we're talking about now. This is Mike Morales. I've known Mike Morales since my MakerBot days, where he helped build a lot of what you heard about 3D printing. He was a major part of the growth there. Since then, he's helped a number of companies, and he'll speak more to this, just change the way they were operating, all based on UX research and kind of applying design thinking to finding out who your users are, what your competition looks like, all of that. And that's what he's going to work with you guys today on. So this is going to be a very interactive portion of the class. I know we've done a lot of kind of lecturing. There's going to be some of that here, but this is all about you and your businesses and figuring out who your users are. Because as Ray said, the most important part, the first step to building a real brand is figuring out who your users are and what you're doing. And that's what we've been trying to kind of create. So did everybody get there? Was everybody able to do some kind of market research and competitive research and feel comfortable in that? Okay, awesome. So Mike is your person who's going to really help lead you down the path to figuring all of that out and getting your business to the next stage. We may not have a lot of time at the end, but we are going to have some takeaways at the end of this that we'll just talk about very briefly, but just know that there are deliverables that are going to come out of this. And without further ado, Mike Morales.
All right. I'm really excited to be working with you guys today. So we're going to split this up into two different sections. The first part of today, we're going to talk about UX design and design thinking. How many of you are familiar with user experience design or design thinking or anything of that nature? Cool. I kind of want to start this off with, does everybody consider themselves a designer in this room? Who does not consider themselves a designer in this room? Great, we go to design school, so that's exactly what we should be doing. Can I actually ask everyone to spend 2 minutes, and I want you to speak to the person next to you and talk about what your design superpower is. What do you think is like your strongest suit? What do you think you really bring to the table in the way that you're approaching this particular project or problem that you're trying to solve? So I'm going to ask you guys to kick the day off with that. I didn't even have to speak about the quiet coyote. Has anyone heard of the quiet coyote before? So for the rest of the day, whenever I go like this, if you see me going like this, just raise your hand up and stop talking, and then I don't have to say, everyone stop talking, and everyone can kind of quiet down and keep moving on. So quiet coyote for the rest of the day. Cool. I want to hear a little bit. I know it's like, I hear like, whoa, this is weird. What is this guy talking about, quiet coyote? It's a very effective tool. I use it with large groups of people. Okay, so I'd love to hear a little bit about what you guys think your superpowers are. Who wants to start? Yeah.
I'm more finding the solution to a situation.
Finding a solution to a situation. Problem solver. I like it. What else? What else do we have?
I think I'm really good at finding either simple imagery or the simplest way to convey, and I'm not doing a good job right now, but to express something. Simple ways through imagery and words to express a specific idea.
Awesome. Simplify a concept, communicate it clearly. Awesome. Solving problems, communication.
Identifying and surveying the audience and their patterns.
That is a great one. Do you know what we're going to talk about today? Because that's an excellent one. So surveying the audience and identifying patterns. Very cool. We're going to come back to that a little bit later on.
Putting words into graphics and telling the story in graphics.
Yeah, putting the words into graphics, telling story in graphics. That's really, really important, right? Image recognition is much faster than any type of word, so being able to do that is an incredibly good talent. Let's get one more.
Make empty space to be used more efficiently.
Make empty space to be used more efficiently. We can get real meta and think about empty spaces in our business environment too, right? We're going to make empty spaces, gaps in the business efficient. Awesome, I love that. But generally speaking, white space and being able to use space to your advantage is a really great one. Cool. When people ask me what my superpower is, my design superpower, my answer is empathy. Like hardcore, that's what my design superpower is. What I want all of you to walk away with today is whatever you think your superpower is today, I want you guys to start building the power of empathy and making sure that that's a part of your tool belt. That's going to be if I had to boil this down into like one word, that's everything that we're going to speak about today. Empathy. How do we understand our users? How do we understand our audience? How do we make sure that we connect with them? And how do we make sure that we solve problems for them? So this whole first section typically takes me about an hour and a half to run through. I'm going to try to jam this out in half an hour so we can get into the second part so that you guys can actually start acting on how to go through that path of identifying an audience and patterns and focusing on those patterns. That's going to be like everything that we're going to be speaking about today. Okay, so we're going to cover what is design, which this is a room full of designers, so this is going to be an interesting conversation that we'll have. What is UX, and then the double diamond. Has anyone ever heard of the double diamond? Has anyone ever heard of the British Design Council? Cool. It's awesome. You guys are going to walk away with so much more knowledge in your brains today. This is going to be, this is one, well, I'm going to get into it. I don't want to scoop myself. We'll get into that in a minute. I'm going to talk a little bit on myself real quick, just to intro you guys so you know me. Typically, I like to start just with empathy and humans, human type things. So I'm going to tell you who I am. I wish I had an opportunity to actually learn where all of you guys are coming from, but we don't have that much time. So first and foremost, I'm a human being with very important features that are associated with myself. I have a wife, I have a dog, and I love to eat ice cream way too much to the point that my wife gets really angry at me. And just recently, I'm going to be having a baby in May 17th of next year, which is going to be great. So we're one more addition to my overall persona. I hadn't actually told James that yet, so that's brand new. Cool. And then from a professional background, I went to Pratt here. I'm an I'm an alumni from Pratt, graduated from the CommD department way back in 2005. Since then, I've joined a bunch of different companies, started my early career all the way in the publishing world with the whole concept of using white space and using imagery and how is it that you tell stories. Eventually made my way to Wired. I was at Wired when we launched the first digital publication. Does anyone read Wired? It's an awesome magazine, very cool, really cool people. Got to work with Scott Dadich. Anyone know Scott Dadich? Scott Dadich was like one of my design idols for a very, very long time. So I was on the Wired team when we launched that first digital publication on the iPad, if any of you can remember all the way back then. This basically, I had a bunch of little steps in here that led me into the path of understanding how to better communicate and how to better provide experiences in some sort of digital fashion, and also physical spaces is a big thing that I focused on, which is what brought me to MakerBot, where I worked with James, and we got to kind of tackle this huge problem of how is it that we better improve an experience with 3D printing. Has anyone used 3D printers here before? Who's terrified of 3D printers when I say 3D printers? Or like, it's super scary. I don't know how to 3D model. I don't know how to make these things happen. That was generally the sentiment that we kind of encountered when we were trying to introduce this thing to the consumer world. So I won't go super deep into that. From there, I did a few other things. Most notably, I was most recently a VP of UX and design at a company called Reserve, where we were basically trying to take down OpenTable. Yeah, I can say that publicly. So General Assembly, and then just recently I was at General Assembly teaching user experience design to a bunch of people, just like you guys. And this is actually my next step. I'm going to be going to work at a company called TodayTix, working on some of their digital products as well. Really quickly by the numbers, I've built 3 teams to scale. So I've built 3 teams from scratch to be able to scale up with a company. Similar to what you guys are doing, you guys are very much at the very early stage, and each one of you, if this all goes accordingly, you will be building teams and actually making people do things and helping, recruiting people to help you do the things that you guys are going to do. Smallest team, I've been a team of 1. Largest team, technical difficulties. Largest team, I've led a team of 20 designers, which was really crazy. Never want to do that again. I mean, I do, but probably in a little different fashion. Worked on 5 hardware products, and I had a digital product slide that I missed, and we exited MakerBot at 60x, which was pretty incredible. So that's about me. Okay, what is design? Can I ask all of you guys to, again, partner up with the person next to you, and if you guys have to give a definition, define the term design. What is that to you guys? Go for it. Man, you guys are pros. So good. Usually that takes about half an hour to actually work, and I have to be yelling and stuff. I just heard an amazing thing. Can you please repeat what you just said? You said something along the lines of, I'm great at design, just the ideas that I have. So you just said something like that, which is really great.
I'm a fine artist, so I can like draw something. I'm not going to come up with the idea behind it as well.
Cool. Awesome. I know that that's a little bit outside the question that I asked, but that is That is what we're going to focus on today, is how is it that we get to a really good idea. And that's going to be a mix of like our own vision plus finding out what people are actually looking to do, or the needs that people are needing to have fulfilled. We'll get into that. That was just so cool. I was like, oh my God, we need to say that out loud. Yeah, can I hear a little bit about what you guys, how do you define design?
We define it as creative communication.
Creative communication, yeah. Cool, I like that.
Solving problems.
Solving problems, yes. This is like what we want to do. Design is solving problems. We're going to talk a little bit about how that, yeah, that's good. I'm going to come back to that.
So we had a little bit of a conversation about contrasting design with art,
Mhm.
and how art is certainly open to interpretation, and there's levels of, meaning, and it's okay if the user or the experiencer has a different one than the one you intended. But design is about really aligning your intention with how it is perceived by your audience.
Aligning with your intention on how it's going to be perceived, or I'm going to add experienced by your audience. That is awesome. I love that. That's a really good distinction to make too. Let me get one more.
To give the right amount without any excess.
To give the right amount without any excess. Yeah, I think intentional. That sounds to me like just be very intentional with things that you do. Which goes very much into the thing that I want to kind of talk about, design today. So obviously a verb, right? You're going to do the thing. Design is everywhere. Like literally anywhere that you look at here, all of these things have been designed. These are all things that the shirt that you're wearing, the microphone, the chairs, the carpets, the building, everything is designed. All these things that are designed have had very intentional outcomes, right? So it's like very purposeful. You're looking to do, the thing that you're designing has some sort of purpose. You're having it fulfill something. But the big thing that I want to focus on today is the difference between unintentional consequences and intentional consequences. It's very easy to design things. It's very hard to make sure that you try to mitigate the unintended consequences based on those designs every step of the way. That's what we want to focus on today. You can do things, and it's best to, you're never going to fully understand what the unintended consequences of whatever your design decisions are, but you can try to become as informed as you possibly can be before you actually release something out into the world. That's what we want to focus on today. That's what user research is. That's what UX design is. It's how is it that you learn, and how is it that you become as intentional as you possibly can be every single step of the way. I was going to ask people to read this, but I feel like you guys aren't going to be able to. Can you read this for me? I get tired of reading things. I'm not going to do that this whole thing.
Design is many worldly challenge are the direct results of unintended consequences. Smart design means taking into account externalities that may arise from our direct intention.
Yeah. Smart design means taking into account externalities that may arise from our direct intention. That's what we're going to speak about today. That's just a more articulate version of what I just said out loud to you guys. So, Mike Monteiro, super cool dude, defines design is how we communicate what an object does or its function through its shape and its form. Let that seep in for a little bit. I know that, how many of you are designing, or the projects that you're working on, how many of them are physical products? Cool. How many of them are digital products? How many of them are like spaces or like overall experiences? Cool. So all of these things, it's all applicable, right? So design is how we communicate what an object does. We can also say like a space or a digital product through its shape and its form. I want to think about that a little bit. So what do we think this is? I mean, we obviously know what this is, but do we feel like this actually communicates what a user could do with this thing? No, no one believes so. Yes, it does, right? It's a glove. It's pretty straightforward. You put on a glove. I'm starting with a very simple concept here, because user experience design can be applied literally to anything, whether it's a digital product, a simple physical product, the sleep mattress that we were speaking about a little bit earlier. So there are very intentional decisions here. The form dictates how it's going to be able to be used. Those are called affordances. This object affords a user to be able to do certain things. Design is also the process we undertake to solve a problem. I think a lot of you guys are saying solving a problem. There's a methodology or a pattern or a way that you're going to approach solve a problem. What we're going to focus on today is making sure that we're actually solving that problem. Sometimes people design things based on what they think a problem is, and what we're going to focus on today is how to move beyond that. I was going to go through this whole spiel about this, but I'm gonna just like speak through this relatively quickly so we can make up some time. There's a few different bags here. This bag is very intentionally designed for a few different things. There are all different types of bags that you can buy if you're going to use something. I see a variety of different ones today, a lot of tote bags. This particular bag has certain features. It's lightweight, it's pretty compact, not a lot of frills to it. Most of the times these are going to be used in some sort of beach setting. So they're very intentional decisions when the designer actually went about making this bag. We're not going to make it really big, we're not making it really heavy, we're going to make it some sort of material that's really easy to clean. There are very specific use cases that this thing needs to be used, that you need to be able to design around so that it's a very effective product. Different bag, Herschel's. They're all over the place. This is, there's a different intended use for this. It's kind of like a throwback. There's some leather straps on there. It's a little bit more of a fashion statement. And it's used really more for like city daily commuting or whatever it is that you're going to do. Specifically, potentially for school, for work, whatever it is that you're going to use. There's padded straps. There are a few more pockets for organization. There's very specific features that are involved with this bag, again, that are meant to solve some sort of problem. Then there are like these crazy modular bags, right? Military style bags that have a lot of modules that you can attach to them. They're also solving some sort of very different need. In this particular instance, it's really, really rugged, really sturdy, can withstand a lot of, wear and tear. It can also be augmented to fit your needs, whoever is using this overall bag needs. So if we look at all three of these bags, they're all very different. They're all bags, but they all have very, very different intentions. That's what I want to focus on today. The focus of today should be turning whatever it is that you guys are doing. We're not just designing a bag, but we're designing a bag for one very specific reason, and that's what we want to get to today. You may not have all the answers today for that, but we're going to get you guys on the path to be able to get all of those answers. So what is UX? User Experience Design. Typically when I do this, I'm in some sort of room. Has anyone ever heard of Donald Norman? Yeah. Has anyone heard of a Donald Norman door? How many people open doors the wrong way on a daily basis? It's the most frustrating, annoying thing in the world. At certain I work in this building where there are literally no signifiers on how you should open the door. The only way you can tell is by looking up and seeing if there's a little block up. And then literally at least 15 times a day, open the door the wrong way. That is a very good example of really poor UX design. And those are the kind of things that we want to try to avoid. Frustration from opening up a door the wrong way. It's a super small thing, but small decisions like that end up turning into really big things, and that's what we want to get into today. It's my dog Moon. The way I define UX design is the intersection of human empathy and systematic problem solving. Those are the most important things, right? We have problems, we need to solve those things, we need empathy, we need to understand why it is that we need to solve problems for people, not just solve problems for ourselves. Jesse James Garrett, also someone that you guys should check out. Really great person. UX is design of anything independent of medium. Super important. All of you guys are working on a whole bunch of different things, not just digital products or physical products or spaces. They're all different things. UX is the design of anything independent of medium or across media with human experience as the explicit outcome and human engagement as the explicit goal. That's a really packed statement that I want you guys to really take in. Human experience as the explicit outcome. The outcome of anything you design is going to be a human experience. The goal is human engagement. You want people to engage with your thing. UX is a process used to determine what the experience will be like when a user interacts with your product. You want people to be happy, right? I'm assuming everybody wants to. If they're happy, they're going to use it. If they use it, that means you're going to make money. If they make money, that means your business grows. So we want them to be able to have a positive experience with your products. How does this make you feel? So I've had this image for a while, and I was like, yeah, this is a great example. It's like the worst thing in the world. I didn't think that this really existed. I was like, maybe someone kind of made this up. I went to Myrtle Beach this past summer and actually experienced this drawer. I have a photo on my phone with this where it actually happens. This sucks. It's terrible. Oh my God, it's so frustrating. You can literally not get to the back of this drawer. So frustrating. It's the worst thing in the world. I usually have a few other kind of examples of this, but these things happen. These are terrible unintended consequences of design decisions. We want to avoid these things with what you guys are working on. So why does UX matter? to solve real problems. That's what we want to be doing. How many people feel like they have a really good problem that they're solving? How many people have spoken to other people about the problem that you're solving? Cool, same people, hands up. I wish we had time because I would ask you, each of you, how you were going about that. I've worked with a lot of CEOs and a lot of founders, and there's usually a bunch of really important things that you should and shouldn't do when you're trying to validate some assumptions that you have, and we're going to go through those things. This is really important. I feel like if I have a tattoo I want to get rid of, I think this is maybe what I want to cover it with. You are not the user. There's a few words that I would do it. You are not the user. That is so important. I want to say that again. You are not the user. That doesn't mean that you are not allowed to have a vision or assumptions or some sort of thing that you're really passionate about, but what's most important is that you take yourself out of the equation and make sure that you validate everything that you're moving forward with, not the user. Don't assume you know their problems. Don't assume they will behave as expected. Don't assume you've thought of everything. These are really important things. And this is very easy to fall down a path. Again, I've worked with a lot of CEOs and a lot of founders that really feel like, no, you don't understand. I know exactly what people want. And there is something to that. There's like really good instincts. Has anyone ever heard of like the argument between design doing and design thinking? Design doing is specifically like, I'm going to trust my gut and I'm going to do this thing. And design thinking is the whole path of like actually validating some of those things. I think a really good place is to land is somewhere in the middle. Trust your gut, but make sure that you actually go through and get a little research done to make sure that you're validating some of those things. You don't want to focus on what people are saying that they want to do, which is something that we're going to cover. I'm going to breeze through this really quickly. You know, what a business wants: differentiation, brand expression, refinement. Has anyone ever gone to EMP, Hello Madison Park? Cool restaurant. I've never been there myself. It's on one of the places that I want to go to. But they're like a very prestigious, very like established restaurant. It's like a really great place. This is what they want: differentiation. They want brand expression. They want to be able to come off really refined. So when you log on their website, 11 Madison Park, beautiful, like really nice, really clean, great use of white space. What a user wants: I want to see the menu, I want to see the address, I want to see the hours, I want to see reservations, I want contact information. I don't see that here. Sucks. Sucks for me as a user. Okay, fine, great. I get part of this experience, but I don't get to do the thing that I want to do. I click on that overall thing, then I get this. Great. Beautiful picture. I know that I want to go there. I just want to get these things. And it isn't until third click that I actually start getting some of these things. These are the kind of things that brand is very important. We need to make sure that we balance brand with function and what we're actually trying to improve. There's a big argument there to be made too. We could probably speak an hour about like, well, no, the experience is really important. You want to make it seem very like elevated. There are ways to do that where you don't sacrifice functionality. Skip this. Okay, has anyone seen this document before? This diagram? Yeah, super important. This is the thing that you guys should all like focus. This would be the other tattoo. I'll get this on my back. I'll take a picture and I'll send it to you guys. Business, users, tech. These are the things that we're balancing always. As founders, as people that are looking to work on everything, it's making sure that you can focus on these three things. And again, tech can be like actual technology. It can be like construction workers that you're working with to be able to, and architects that you're working to be able to build out a space, or industrial designers for some sort of physical product. Those are going to be your technical constraints around that. Business, you need to make money. Users, you need to be able to solve real user problems. We're going to script this. No, this is good. When we ignore the users, these are the type of things that we hear. I can't find the information I need. It takes so much effort just to do this simple task. I keep getting errors and I don't know why. I have no clue what I'm looking at. I'm never going to use blank again. These are the kind of things that end up happening when we don't meet the user's needs. Flank load right. You can use an eraser on the drafting table or a sledgehammer on the construction site. So everything that we're going to do today is to make sure that you get as much validation as you can before you get further in your project. It's cheap to make design decisions and changes early on. It's cheap to redo work. It's cheap to throw out ideas. All of you guys are trained designers and you know that. You know that you sketch really quickly and you get to refinement later on. The same holds true for all of these things. Anyone ever seen this type of graph before? This is basically like the development cycle of an overall product or an idea or anything you want to do. The further the time goes on, the more expensive it is to make changes. So what we want to do is make sure that you guys get through the iteration process as fast as possible early on so that you're not spending a ton of money to make changes at the end. Double diamond. Okay. We are, I don't know how long I've been up here. We're going to try to breeze through this thing. So this is, if you guys have notebooks, if you guys have computers, if you have your phones, take pictures of these things, because these are the things that you guys are going to want to use throughout the rest of your process. We're going to cover the first quarter of one, or the first half of one diamond today. So how do we do it? UX is not just an end goal. It's a process. That's what we're going to go through, the process of problem solving. It helps us make decisions about what we are designing, why, and for whom. What we're designing, why we're designing, and for whom we're designing it. It was a great segue from the last speaker that we were saying, like, let's focus on our audience. Let's focus on our users. It helps us reduce risk through evidence. That is like the most important thing. It helps us reduce risk through evidence. Do we really need evidence? Yes. Even the best designers need evidence. So this is the balance of design doing and like actual design thinking. I've been doing this for 12 years. I feel like I have great instincts, but I always have to make sure that I check myself and I'm validating any of my assumptions. You're going to have better instincts, which means that you're going to be right more often, but make sure that you always do it and don't get stuck in a rut of not checking. UX is about meeting your audience's needs. We've said that a million times. We'll say it one more time. Without evidence, it's just UI, or it's just like, this is more tailored toward towards digital design, but without actual evidence, it's just pretty things. We don't want to make pretty things. We want to make pretty functional things. What should you do with this evidence? Identify problems people are having. Don't just do what people say they need. Identify patterns. That's really important. One of the biggest pushbacks that I've had whenever I've been speaking to board members, it's speaking about they're like, no, you don't understand. I'm going to tell people what they need. That's how we're going to make money. That's how we're going to get really big. Yes, we're going to tell people what they need. We're not going to do what they tell us they need, but there's a way that we go about that where we're basing that on actual real user problems. And that's focusing on unspoken needs and focusing on real user problems, not assumed user problems. Remember, people are experts in their own problem, not the solution. That's exactly what I just said, right? So much gold in what people are actually having problems with. That's what you want to focus on. Don't focus on all the solutions that they have. You're going to speak to 100 people. They're going to give you 100 different solutions for whatever problem you're solving for. What you want to get to is the patterns that you identify in the problems that they're having. Validate your ideas. Test your designs. Get feedback on your overall direction. Check early and often so you don't get too far off track. All of you guys are probably great about receiving feedback, which is really good. You want to make sure that you're always getting feedback as much as you possibly can. Developing our decision making skills. We're trying to develop our gut instincts for decision making, which, again, depending on how each one of you have been doing this, you already have this built in. The more that you do this, the more that you validate, especially within the field that you're working on, the better you'll get at making those decisions. UX is hard to do well because it takes time to develop your gut, which requires real-world experience and making mistakes. So, how many of you have a lot of experience around the idea that you guys are working on? How many of you are just like brand new to it? Whoa, I only saw 4 hands go up total. How many are like, I don't really have an idea? That's fine too. We'll get into it. Best practices. It depends on context. So we're going to get into it. Each one of you are solving a slightly different problem. So there's going to be slightly different best practices as we move through it. Okay, so now the double diamond. That was all kind of like set up. This is like really the stuff that we want to focus on. This is all also available online. This is just one take on this overall framework. There's 2 parts of this diamond. Designing the right thing is the most important thing, right? We want to make sure that we are solving the right problem. We want to make sure that we're validating all of our assumptions. We want to make sure that the problems that we are executing against, there's space in the marketplace, it's actually a valid problem, all of the things that are required to make sure that we are designing the right thing. And the second part is designing things right. Once we know that we have a problem, we're going to then design that thing. So this is adapted from Dan Nestler. Dan Nestler has a great Medium article. British Design Council came up with this double diamond a while ago. And there are several people that have made adaptations to it. This is an awesome one. I love it. It's really, really good. So again, designing the right thing, designing things right. There's 2 parts, research and synthesis on the first part, and ideation and delivering the actual thing. How many of you have like a good idea of what the initial problem statement? That's usually what kicks off all the way at the beginning of this diamond. 5. How many of you are like, I really need to work on an initial problem statement. I think I have an idea, but I'm not really sure and I need to like really refine it? How many are here just to listen to me talk? Because again, not a lot of hands going up, which is good. But we'll get into that. I'm going to actually go through and speak to all of you guys at the tail end of this. We're going to run through an activity. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on these. What I'll do is I'm just going to keep them up, have you guys take pictures and take some notes. I think we'll also probably share a PDF of this with everybody so that you'll have it. So the research phase. Identify users and stakeholders, then speak to them or observe. So this is the first part that we're going to focus on, and I'm going to cover this in the next half of what we're going to speak about today. Why? So that we understand and empathize by gathering insights about the business and users. So empathizing. This whole first diamond is about understanding and empathizing. This is a divergent phase where we are going to be, so this is also a part of the diagram. This first diamond is divergent, which means that we have some sort of initial assumed problem statement. We're going to go out and collect a bunch of data. So we're going to have a lot of stuff. And the second part of the diamond is synthesizing that down so that we can redefine some sort of problem statement. There's a bunch of different ways that you could do it. Desk research, which is what you guys, some of you did leading up into today. Mind mapping, competitive analysis. That's also something that you guys did leading up to today. Content audits, data gathering, user interviews. That's what we're going to focus on today. Stakeholder interviews, contextual inquiries, usability testing and ethnographic studies. I think we're going to speak about this, but then I want to talk a little bit about contextual inquiry and ethnographic studies because they're going to be really important for your overall projects. Synthesizing the information, this is basically taking it all down and making sense of it. You're going to have a bunch of stuff and you got to figure out how to actually boil that down to something that makes sense, which ultimately concludes in some, oh, yes. I usually speak about this. Sometimes after you go through those things, you didn't get the answers that you needed, and sometimes you have to go back and iterate on this overall process. Sometimes you have to go back, and oftentimes I'll do some research, speak to some people, and I'm like, I actually walked away with this with a lot more questions than I have answers. And then you have to go back and ask some of those questions again and get those answers again. It's okay to go through it and iterate. Design is a really messy process, and you have to go back and make sure that you actually you have the right things before moving forward. So sometimes we have to iterate. Once we've gotten all the information, synthesized that down, then we actually go down and redefine some sort of initial problem statement. You might say, oh, I think we needed, I don't know, eggs. And then after a bunch of research, you realize that you needed butter. Yeah, whatever it's going to be. But it's all about redefining and refocusing so that you know that you're designing the right thing. We're going to get into this in a minute. Actually, this is going to be one of our first activities, so I'm going to actually read this. So, redefining a problem statement. You should start with an initial problem statement. And again, just show of hands, has anyone heard initial problem statement or problem statement before? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Cool. Do you guys have, for those of you that raise your hands, do you guys have initial problem statements? Awesome. I'm going to ask you guys to redefine your problem statements today. So we're going to spend 5 minutes to redefine your problem statements. And this is going to be the initial problem statement. So really good parts of this are a good problem statement must include an insight. What did we find in our research? In this particular instance, we can replace this with what do we find with our research, and what do we, if you didn't do any research, what are our assumptions? What have we defined based on our assumptions? We can replace this with. Persona. Who is the intended audience? Do you guys have an idea of who your intended audience is? Awesome. So we'll go through this process, and we will call this your intended insight, or your assumed insight and your assumed persona. Problem. What problem or pain point do we find in our research? Again, we haven't done that much research likely. So what problem do we assume is out there? And what is the goal? What is the opportunity or goal, not the solution? Very important. This is the part that I see people get wrong time and time again with problem statements. It's usually baked in with a solution. We're going to get butter, and we're going to do this thing with the butter, and this is the actual solution. Or we're going to get butter, right? Butter is a solution for something. I don't know what it would be. But you do not want a solution in your problem statement. Specifically because if you have a solution, then you're basically eradicating that whole second phase, which is allowing yourself to really go out wide and ideate and come up with a bunch of different potential solutions and then validate or disprove some of those solutions. So problem statements should not contain solutions. And the structure is basically insight, persona or archetype, user, problem. How might we is usually how we start the second part. So I would look at this as two separate parts. The first part is a setup. There is this thing going on in the world. The second part is how might we solve this particular problem? An example of this, when patients are diagnosed with a serious condition, they're given a range of treatment options. Patrick, we're giving our persona a name, Patrick is overwhelmed with the information available online. How might we help him decide on the right treatment while weighing the factors that matter to him most? No solution, it's just a problem statement. Let's try it. So we're going to spend 5 minutes. I'm going to ask each one of you to, in your notebooks or on your laptops, based on the things that you have already done or assumed, start laying these things out. Insight, persona, user problem, how might we? Any questions before we get started?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Before you mentioned that we're designing for the user, which is key.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been designing for a long time, okay, dark ages, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we always solve two problems. Differentiate the needs from the wants,
Yes.
okay, which I didn't see, something was missing there that I didn't see. And then the last one was that for the last, I would say 15 years, they had dwelled on needs that we have to solve for the human needs, for the human behavior. Because when we design something, it's for my ego. Oh, I gotta do this beautiful thing.
Yeah.
We're not resolving for somebody else.
Yes.
Who is taller than me that has different functioning.
Yeah. Yes. So I want to repeat back what you said, which is like, hey, I didn't see you speaking about needs versus wants. And I also didn't hear you speaking about behaviors. Yes, that I have basically another 3-hour lecture that we can speak about those things. This is primarily the framework on the way that you're going to move on things. But yes, definitely not focusing on what people want, right? Because that's what they say they want. They usually have some sort of solution. You're focusing on the pain points and the needs. And then in terms of, you said one other thing, behaviors. All of those things are based on behaviors. So the things that I mentioned that I wanted to speak about, which is user interviews, ethnographic studies, and contextual inquiries, they're all qualitative methods to be able to get down to the behaviors. The second part of this is we're going to speak about how do we start unpacking, how do we start asking people what their behaviors are, how do we start observing those behaviors so that we can actually come up with insights to actually design things. Great question. Any other questions before we get started? Cool. So I'm going to start a 5-minute timer here. Yes?
Quick question. The project that we're working on, there are kind of 3 different users. Should we write 3 different, can I write 3 different problem statements, or are you challenging me to try to just get down to 1?
Yeah. Do one problem statement. If you have 3 personas that you've already come up with, or 3 users, try to identify what is the primary user, and focus on that one. And there's a whole, so we were speaking about personas is the second part of this diamond, which is where you start like taking all your research and synthesizing that down to a redefined problem statement and personas and a bunch of other kind of deliverables. But in your instance, try to focus on the primary one. Hopefully, if you have 3, they all have similar type of needs. If they don't, that's okay.
It's fine. But
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Do you guys want this up, or do you want the sample statement?
Sample.
Okay, cool. This one? Okay, great. So let's do this. We're going to do this until 56. Cool. I'm like so behind schedule now that we are going to move really quickly. So I would normally ask you guys to speak out your problem statements, but I'm going to pause for that. And if we have time, we'll do a little bit when we get into the user research section. I want to really quickly go through the rest of the diamonds that we're going to go through. So just as a recap, I want to go back and talk about these things. So we just spoke about the research part of this. The second part that we're going to speak about, we went through the research, we went through the synthesis, and we went through the redefining problem statement. We're here. So now we're going to talk about once you've redefined all of these problem statements, once you have all these things that you have done, then you're going to move into the second part. So some of you are actually a little bit more in this area, and some of you are a little bit more all the way at the beginning. There's a bit of a range on where everybody is. So let's talk a little bit about this. So the fourth phase is actual ideation. So once you've done your research, once you've identified your personas and your users, and you've narrowed it down, and you've identified some sort of problem statement, and you feel really good about that problem statement, then you can start moving forward to actually creating those solutions. Again, this is particularly good when you have a team that you're working with. I'm sorry, I don't have my microphone on. Yeah, so once you have that problem statement, then you can start ideating, and the entire team can start moving forward to try to figure out what the solutions are for that particular problem. So this is where sketches and wireframes and mockups and prototypes and user testing comes up. So, sorry, what's your name? Jim. So Jim sounds like he has come up with some sketches, some wireframes, some mockups for his particular problem. He's basically in the stage of about to create a prototype, which is basically in the second part of this diamond. So once you've actually done that, then you want to start getting out and start doing some user testing. That's going to be that first part of that second diamond. Again, sometimes you're going to get this wrong. Sometimes you're going to do all these things. Sometimes you're going to come up with a bunch of ideas, and sometimes you're going to get the solution wrong, and you're going to have to go back and try again. So maybe there's, in Jim's particular instance, he's solving for some drainage issue, and maybe the way he anticipated this thing to work in the final product actually doesn't really work and needs to go back to the drawing board and come up with some new solutions. So iteration, 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 it usually happens quite a bit in this ideation phase. And then you're going to deliver. So delivering is in whatever fashion you guys are doing, whether it's hardware and something that you're going to deliver final CAD files to your manufacturer, whether it's the restaurant and you're going to deliver final plans to your architect and to your chefs and like come up with a final whatever it is that you're going to do, or if it's a digital product and you're going to do final specs for some sort of product that you're going to create. Do you guys all have the different parts labeled? Who does not? I know some of you don't, but that's okay. If you don't, I'm going to go back. So write this in your notebook, write this in your computer, write this somewhere, the different parts of the overall double diamond. Yes. With the focus that we're going to, today, the second part of this, we're going to speak about the research phase. Let's get into the next one. We have only 40 minutes, which sucks. So I have probably about 30 minutes of activity, so I'm going to try to go through this very quickly. If I go through too fast, say like, dude, slow down. Dude, I'm not getting any of it. But check me on this when I start going through it. Okay. So we're going to go through. I'm getting stuck over here. What is user research? Why is user research important? What do we need to discover when we're doing this work? I think we're going to probably skip through some of this stuff. I'm going to let you guys read this offline. I want to get specifically into the methodology that we're going to be using today, which is user interviews. And then we're going to recap some research methods. So what is user research? Really great quotes. Guy that likes apples. If I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about the solution. That is it. We could just walk away now. That's basically it. We want to really think about the problem and then start focusing on the solution. That's what user research is, making sure that we understand. The understand phase is so important. Some of you guys have already gotten through the whole understand phase and are on that second phase. Give me 6 hours to cut down a tree, and I'll spend the first 4 hours sharpening an axe. Same thing. Two way smarter people, way more successful people than I am that are saying the things that you guys should be doing. So again, double diamond, we're on the research phase. So it's divergent, gathering data. That's what you guys should be focusing on now, at least moving into the next session. Research, we're going to focus specifically on the usability test. The user interview, and maybe contextual inquiry. I'll speak about that really, really loosely. Why is user research important? 4 reasons. We need it so that we can solve real user problems, not our problems, not our assumed problems. Help align the team. So research gets us to a redefined problem statement, which makes sure that we are all on the same page. The worst thing is to tackle a project where 3 people are working on it and 3 people think there are 3 different solutions for the thing, or 3 different problems that you're trying to solve. That's really the worst part. 3 different solutions is okay, because that means that you can test some of those things. Saves money, plain and simple. As long as you get the research done, that means you eliminate bad ideas, you eliminate early mistakes, and you save money. Foundational to user-centered design. You should all want to do user-centered design because it will make you more successful in your ventures. Solve the user problem. We went through this already. Don't assume you know their problems. Don't assume they will behave as you expect them to. Don't assume they've thought of everything. I've worked on a lot of different products. Every single time, the way we intend for someone to actually use this thing, they always end up using it in a slightly different way that we wanted to, which is not a bad thing. Most people are like, no, that's not the way you're supposed to use it, or that might be our initial inclination to do. But it's really great when people use something slightly different than you intended, because then you can learn from that and really design something for them, which is great. I think you said it perfect, which is design sometimes can be thought about as a very egotistical thing. I want to design this thing and give it to the world. No, we want to design things that solves problems for people. That's user-centered design. We want to design something for, I want to design something for all of you want to design something for me and everybody else.
But there's nothing wrong with being a prima donna, right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, a little ego is good, but don't let it get over the top. I think it's is the most important thing. There's a really, really good stated way of user-centered design, which is we need to stop having people learn how to use the things that we create and having the things that we create foundationally based on the way people want to use them, right? So we don't need to learn machines. Machines need to learn us. That way we can use them the way that we want to use them. Really important. You're not the user. What do we do with assumptions? Okay to have assumptions. Really good to have assumptions. Really good to have visions. Really good to have a point of view. Don't discount that. Just take that into your user research and validate or disprove any of the assumptions or any of the thoughts that you have going in. So if you're like, I really feel like I know what this thing is, cool, go and check it out. See a couple of people laughing. Does anyone know about this? Yeah. Right? How many hours and how much money went into creating this thing? Who's familiar? Who's not familiar with the story? So this is like a massive fail. It's a beautiful machine. There was like this company that was like, we're going to design the best juicer in the world. It's going to have just the best, most perfect juice created. They had this bag that goes into this machine, and this is beautifully designed machine. You know, a ton of money that went into industrial design, into prototypes, into final execution. It's beautiful. It's just like gorgeous. I want this in my kitchen. There's a bag that goes in there. It was. Does anyone remember how much it was? It was like pretty. It was not cheap. It was really. $700. $700, yeah. $700 for the perfect juicer. Okay, that's pretty expensive. Oh, I had it in here. So it was originally 700, and they dropped down to 400. So not a market. They couldn't sell it. They assumed that there was a problem. The problem, right? People need the perfect juice. We're going to sell it to them for $700. Turns out, no, $400. And this is how people actually used it. So who are we designing this for? Ourselves? Or are we designing for users? This is what we want to avoid. No one's going to buy a $700 machine when they could just squeeze the juice out and have a perfect juice. It's ridiculous. So what you guys want to try to avoid is this.
So, sorry, just so I understand, the juice is already juiced in that bag, and that big machine was just squeezing the juice out of the bag?
I'm sure that if you spoke to somebody, they were like, no, that's not the way you're supposed to do it. It gives it magical powers when it goes to the machine. It's beautiful.
It's like the perfect measurement of water.
Yeah,
So, you know,
like the pressure applied is going to be fantastic. Or
So the way it actually worked was that they had the fruit and vegetables cut up in perfect sized chunks and distributed evenly throughout the bag, so that when it pressed, it was an equal solution all the way down through, so that you had the perfect taste of juice at every step of the way. But then Bloomberg got their hands on the machine and a few things, and a few of their interns, they were like, hey, squeeze it and see what happens. And the interns just squeezed it, and they could do it as fast as the machine.
so a little bit of testing early on may have prevented them from doing, like, I don't know how much R&D work went into actually creating the hardware for this. Sure, the bag maybe is great, but imagine if they would have just completely eliminated the whole hardware and just sold the bags, or whatever that would be, or like a potentially different solution for this thing. So test early, test often. Don't go down the path of creating something and then figuring out that someone can just squeeze the juice out of the bag. Cool? Solve real user problems. Helps align the team. We're going to speed through some of this stuff. Has anyone ever seen this? Just read through this. This is fantastic and so true in all the companies that you work. So how the customer explained it, how the project leader understood it, how the engineer designed it, how the programmer wrote it, or the architect made it, how the sales team executive described it, how the project was documented. This is a real thing when you're working out there. How operations installed it. How the customer was billed, that's the juicero, right? How help desk supported it, what the customer really needed. We want to get here, right? We want to really understand what the users want. Saves time, saves money. Practice user-centered design. Where do we start? 3 things to identify. Internal factors, people, goals and tasks. External factors, context. I'm going to breeze through these things. You guys can go through it. So internal factors, personal history, moods, environmental, personal, culture, habits and dynamics, education, social and academic. So just really understanding your overall audience, understanding the people, goals and tasks. What is the user trying to accomplish? What is the user's motivation? What tasks must the user complete to accomplish their goals? What are the pain points or challenges and the current ways they go about these tasks? This is really focused on a lot of the behaviors, really understanding how it is that people are moving across certain things. External factors, environments, distractions, technologies, analog digital communication. So if you guys are working on digital products, these things do not live in a screen alone. They live wherever it is that they are actually being used. Make sure you understand those things. If they're in a restaurant, these are much more prevalent. If it's a drainage system, the external factors are much more prevalent. This becomes forgotten when people initially start moving towards digital design. It doesn't just live in your phone. 30 minutes left. We're going to skip this. How do we ask for information? So this is the thing, right? If you'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said, whatever it is, faster horses. We do not want to give people what they say they want. We want to give people what they need. So wants versus needs. Really understanding what the needs are, really understanding what the problems are, and then designing solutions on that. I worked at the last company that I worked on digital products for, Company Reserve. We spoke to 117 restaurants. 117 restaurants had 117 different solutions to a lot of them being the same problems. If we would have gone down the path of giving people what they wanted, we'd have like some sort of ridiculous Frankenstein product. It's really understanding the patterns and understanding what the motivation are behind the things that they're trying to actually accomplish.
Hey, Mike, can I just ask you one quick question? This could save you a lot of time, the checklist.
Which one? This one?
Well, you went through all of that.
Yeah,
Because I'm just looking at it. I mean, I'm trying to figure out, but if I had it, all I have to do is, okay.
absolutely. Yeah.
Is this already published?
Yeah, so this is, there's different forms of documentation of these principles and these methods, but they're all out there, and they're all there for you guys to look at. Plus, you will have a PDF with all these things here as well.
This is fantastic.
Cool. I'm glad that you guys like it. This will hopefully make things a lot faster and a lot smoother to actually go through your actual products. So the big challenge, again, this is what we said before. People don't say what they need, they say what they want, right? Need and want, very different. They don't do what they say they do. So how many times do you guys want to go to gym next week? 5 times? What did you say? How many times do you guys want to go to the gym next week? 5 times? How many? At least 3 times? Who said 5? Did you say 5? Who said 5? How many times did you go to gym last week? Oh, that's pretty good. Most of the times that's like I didn't, or I went 2 times, or I went 1 time. But that's actually pretty close. So they don't do what they say they do, right? So making sure when we get into user interviews, it's asking about past behaviors, not about aspirations. Aspirations are very different than behaviors. Do what you would expect, do what they think they do. Cool. So 5 W's, this is what you're going to focus on: who, what, where, when, why, and how. These are basically things that you're going to try to bring out through your research. You're going to try to identify through your research. Who are our users, business or consumers? What demographic do they belong to? Prior knowledge of the content. What is their background, culture, education? Who? What? I'm sorry if I'm going through this super fast. We just need to wrap up really quickly. Not rabbits. Habits. Don't find out what their rabbits are. You want to find out what their habits are and their rituals. I do this literally all the time. So if you catch any other ones, please call them out. You get 15 points. Points get you absolutely nothing except, I don't know, something. All right, so what are their habits and their rituals? Where and how do they spend their time? What are the relationships like with others? What is the relationship with technology? If you guys are not speaking about technology, if you're speaking about restaurants, it's about restaurants. If it's about drainage, what's about drainage? What sites and products do they use? So this is really important to understand what it is that their current habits are. What is it that they're doing? Where do they engage? Where are they interacting? Where are some of the challenges? Who else is involved? How does that affect their mood, decision making, etc.? This is really important because often someone's not working in isolation. They're working in a group, or they're working with others, or they're out in the real world, or something. When are they engaging? What are their routines? What are their challenges? How do they get help? Wait, how do they get the help they need? Yes. So when are they engaging is really important. Is it at night? Is it at the end of the service? Is it only when it's raining? Is it, whatever it's going to be? Really important for you to understand how they're actually using the thing. Why are they engaging? What are they trying to do? What are they trying to achieve? What is their motivation? What do they need? What do they want? It's important to know what people want too. Sometimes the things that people want is good, so don't discount those things. Just make sure that you've solved on the needs, not on the wants. And how do they engage? What technologies, channels, touch points do they use? How do they organize and manage their experience? Who else is involved? What does success look like and feel? It's the last piece. So there's a lot of stuff in there, and there's a lot of different methodologies that you can use to try to extract that, but that is your job, is to find all of those things out, however you need to. We're going to cover one particular method. Get scrappy. You're going to be able to, as you're going through it, you're going to have ideas on how to actually get those things done. I'm going to give you guys some guidelines on things to avoid when you're actually doing those things. Ask, look, listen, try. Ask. Talk to potential users, current users if available, competitive users, unless asked not to. So if you guys are working on a particular project, speak to everybody that you possibly can. You probably don't have existing users. Some of you may, some of you probably don't. Observe people in their real lives. Watch people use equivalent or comparable things. This is so important. This is getting into the real behaviors of how these things are. One of the coolest things that I did when I was in restaurants was I sat down with a lot of restaurant managers and operators. Has anyone been to a restaurant office before? Cool. You'd expect restaurant offices to be like an office. It is not. Restaurant offices are usually this wide and maybe like, I don't know, it's like a little box. And there's usually menus and like back stock and a bunch of stuff. They're really tiny, really uncomfortable. So I observed a lot of people in those spaces. I observed a lot of reservationists in slightly larger offices. The really cool thing was being able to see the externalities that are involved with that. So having people use software to actually manage the restaurant is one thing. Going to the space and seeing the 15 post-its they have next to their computers to help them understand what it is that they're looking at is a completely different thing. So with your spaces, you need to make sure that you understand how they're actually working with things out in the real world. Listen, social media listening, blogs, customer reviews, app store reviews, forums. This is really big. You can do this with desk research, right? It requires less effort. You can go in and find out what people are saying about any particular problem. So if there's like problems with storefronts, what are people saying about that? Go to community blogs, understand what it is that the problems that they're actually having are. Try, embody or walk in another person's shoes. This is a really big one for me. I try to really go through it. I actually wanted to, in my last job, I wanted to get a job in a restaurant just to like fully empathize with all the problems that people were having. But I couldn't do that. What I did was I just actually sat in restaurants literally all night for many nights so that I can really understand how people are actually going through the things that they were going through. A few research methods, interviews, contextual inquiries. So an interview is an interview. I'm going to interview. I'm going to ask you questions. Contextual inquiry is on premise. So if you're talking about restaurants, you're going to go to a restaurant and speak to somebody. If it's about drainage, you're going to go there and actually like ask questions and ask them to go through the things that they normally do. If it's about storefronts, then you're going to go to that space and actually just see people and how they react to the things that you're afraid that they're reacting to. Diary studies. Has anyone heard of that before? Diary studies are basically like for MakerBot, a diary study would have been like, we're going to send a set number of tasks to users. We're going to ask them to just document what it is they do in their own home when they're actually using things and send that information back to us. Pretty cool method, takes a lot of time. You have to recruit users and actually put an entire study together. Card sorting, I'm not going to go through all of these. Surveys is one that is going to be important for you guys. Oh, cool. That was awesome. All right. How much time do I have left? 20 minutes. 20 minutes. You guys ready? So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to go through user interview best practices. You guys are going to create your first interview script, and then you're going to go through and perform one interview. And then if you guys want to do a second one, you guys can do after it. Cool? All right, user interview best practices. Don't just ask people what they want, right? We don't want to know what people want. We want to know what they actually, their pain points are. People are best at telling you about their personal experiences, so don't ask about aspirations. Well, tell me about the last time you did this thing. Tell me about the best time you did this thing. Tell me about the worst time that you had doing this particular thing. Always ask about previous experiences. Most people only know about what is currently possible. So this is really important because you don't want to say like, oh man, tell me, how would you solve this problem that you're having? It is not your user's responsibility to understand what's technically feasible or to come up with like the new innovative thing. So they're going to give you some sort of answer based on that context, which is usually not the thing that you want to be approaching. People aren't going to come up with solutions. We just went through that. You are designing for more than one person. Super important. More than one person. And we're going to get through this. So if you're going to do user interviews, at least do 5 user interviews. It's really good to be able to identify patterns. Someone said like speaking to a bunch of people and identifying patterns. That is the thing that you want to do. Don't design for one person. Don't design for yourself. Get a good swath of people so you can start identifying patterns. It's up to you to interpret what people say. So you guys are going to have to go and read between the lines. You guys are going to have to actually go and try to understand what those needs are. Some people might be saying something and what they really mean is something different. So through the interview process, you're like a detective and you're trying to get to the root of what the problems are. Learn about people's past experiences. We went through this. Tell me about the last time you did whatever. How did that make you feel? Typically with interview scripts, you're going to want to go really broad. Open-ended questions. Don't ask yes/no questions. Do you like tomatoes? Yes, no, no. Like, don't ask those kind of things. You want to ask open-ended questions so they tell you stories. You want them to tell you stories because that's where you get into the real meat about what they actually do, which is the first thing I just right there. Get them to tell you stories. Ask follow-up questions. Don't just ask yes or no questions. Ask about a recent or best worst experience. Great, I said all these things already. Don't jump to solutions. Don't jump to solutions. Don't say, hey, tell me, do you think this is a good solution? Don't do that thing. Always try to get them to tell you about this thing. This is where the pitfalls are for people that don't know how to do user interviews, where your focus is to get unbiased responses. You want to get their behaviors. You don't want to taint their responses. So you also don't want to lead them in their questioning, which is the last one. Don't ask leading questions. A good leading question might be like, oh man, I really hate tomatoes. What do you think about tomatoes? No, right? Like, don't do that. You want to try to be really objective and really open with your overall questions. I don't hate tomatoes, by the way. That was just the thing that was going. Use active listening. Do you have any questions on this thing? That's like the most important thing. Don't ask leading questions and ask open-ended questions. This makes, if you ask leading questions, you basically ruin your entire user interview and you're just getting people to say what you want to say. That's not the point of all of this stuff. The point is to try to understand what people need and want. Yeah, so example of a leading question might be like, some people think that riding skateboards in the city is really dangerous. Can you tell me what you think about that? Leading question. You're priming the overall user for like some potential problem. A better way to state that might be, can you please tell me about your thoughts about riding a skateboard in New York City? You're not priming them with any one particular type of response. So if you have a solution like, man, it really sucks when drains, or I don't even know how I would do one for years. But anyway, I'm not going to go through that. But you can ask leading questions. You can get the thing that you want to hear, but it's not what you need. Use active listening techniques. Repeat things in your own words. Better stated, repeat it in their own words. So when someone says something, just repeat it back to them and make sure that you fully clarify what it is that they are saying. Ask people to summarize their thoughts and focus on the most important points. When people tell you stories, sometimes they might be long-winded. That was awesome. That was a great story. Can I ask you to kind of summarize that last 5 minutes into what were the most important things that you just said to me? Ask why to get to the heart of the matter. Why? Ask why like 5 times. I hate empty storefronts. Why? Because, I don't know, they're really ugly. Why? Because, I don't know, they make me feel bad about my street. Why? because my kids don't like it. Why? Because then it's unsafe. Oh, okay, you feel unsafe on your street. It's much different than I don't like empty storefront windows. So ask why 5 times. It's a really cool tool. Don't be afraid to do it. Don't do it at home, because whoever your partners are get really angry at it. Listen, don't push for something specific. You don't know what they're answering. You don't know why they're answering that way. So if someone answers something in some sort of weird way, don't really have them explain it to you. So don't push for any particular answers. Don't interrupt. So when we're going to work on creating a script, you're going to have 10 things you want to ask, or 15 or 30 or 50 things. Know that you're having a conversation with somebody. Don't cut them off and be like, okay, great, that's enough. I want to ask you this next question. You want to be able to have a really good flow. Yeah, they do.
People laugh, but that's actually more common than not doing
Yes,
that.
it's a thing. Because you're going to be in your head, you're like, oh, no, I worked 5 hours on this script. I want you to answer all my questions. Let it flow. Let them answer the questions as you start moving forward. Okay, how to interview. Don't ask people what they want. We went through this already. Ask about specific experiences. Take observational notes. So if you're, this is great. If you're with a team, have someone take notes and have someone facilitate the conversation. That way you're having a natural conversation with somebody. If you don't and you're alone, then ask if you can record it and just take really important notes. Don't actually transcribe the entire conversation, because then someone's not you're not speaking to that person. Pro tips, guide the conversation, don't control it. I'll let you guys read this. Be prepared to improvise. It's never going to go the way you want it to go. You're going to have some sort of script and it's going to go off on a tangent. And that's great. Those tangents are awesome because you're getting into their own personal experiences. Be mindful of cognitive bias. You may exhibit the same exact behaviors as an interviewee, but you shouldn't assume their reasons are the same as yours. Cool? That's really important. Just because you do the same thing doesn't mean it's for the same reasons. So make sure that you get to the bottom of that. Okay, let's do this. How much time do we have left? 15 minutes. So you guys are going to have time to write a script, and then you can interview each other afterwards. That's what we're going to do. So I'd like, this was going to be a script for, actually I'm going to turn this over to you guys. I'm going to improvise right now. We typically would do a script based on a problem statement, so that you would do some sort of interview script that would be very directed based on your problem. How many people feel like they're ready to actually start doing that? How many people feel like they have a good problem statement? Cool. If you have a good problem statement, what I'm going to ask you guys to do is maybe just shift over to this side of the room, and if you guys are ready to start doing an interview script, which is going to be prepare a list of questions you want to ask, disregard the backpack. Focus on your particular topic. We're going to do an exercise on this, and then you guys are going to go do it on your own, but work on your own project. Take 3 so what you're going to do is a list of topics that you could ask about. Just do all of, make an entire list. Then you're going to focus on 3 topics and expand each one of them into a few questions. So topics, and then expand topics into questions. It's okay if you have 15 topics that you want to ask them about. Choose the most important ones after you define them, and then do some questions around them. Remember that you're trying to understand their past experiences, so ask open-ended questions. I actually don't have this document for you guys, so disregard this last statement. Cool, so let me restate that. If you are ready to actually do an interview script, come over to this side, come up with a list of topics, narrow that down to 3 or 4 topics, then ask a bunch of questions or write a bunch of questions about those. Remember not to have them be leading. Remember not to ask open-ended questions, not yes and no's. If you guys want to work on problem statements, I'm going to ask you guys to move over to this side of the room. Cool? You guys ready to do it? And then basically we'll just workshop for the rest of the time. And I'll come around and ask you guys questions and see if you guys need any help.
And before you guys jump into this real quick, so because we're running short on time,
It's really important, guys.
The assignment for next session is going to be, because we have a bunch of time, we want you to go out and interview 100 people. 100 people with the interview script you have here, and keep some form of documentation for all of those interviews. And then next time, Mike will likely be back and we'll go through the synthesis stage so that you can redefine your problem statement in a way that we can move forward. Because what we want is we want you guys to have something that works. And so interview 100 people. If you can go out and spend a couple of hours watching people interact with what you're doing, I know for some of you who work in the field, it's a little easier than people in classrooms, but yeah.
Can I augment that a little
Yeah.
bit? All right. So, how much time do you guys have between this and the next session?
So that's the thing is.
It's until February 3rd.
It's February 3rd, so it's the
Yeah.
longest gap, and we want to make sure we're giving them something really
Totally.
substantive
Yeah.
so that they can stay engaged and work towards the pitch competition in April.
Cool. So what I can do is send a couple of things your way, which is a couple of documents for best documenting overall user interviews. If you guys have that much time, what I would probably suggest is doing like 100. So, all right, I'm going to talk about some stuff now. This is totally kind of like ad hoc. What you want to do is not interview. You're not going to go out to the street and find the first 100 people that you find and interview them. What do we think we want to do before we interview people or speak sense vetting? Audience. We want to screen people out. So there's a whole method that is called like essentially screener surveys, where you put a bunch of questions and screen out an audience. So a really good tactic. Everyone take notes on this because I don't have anything on this. So a really good way to identify users and recruit users. That's what you're going to want to do. Is putting a quick survey together. What are the most important things that you? So if you're working on restaurants, you probably don't want to speak to people that only cook at home. So you're going to want to screen those people out. You're not going to want to interview those people. You don't want to get junk data into your overall set. If you're working on like compost or like people that care about recycling food, you don't want to speak to people that could care less about recycling. So find out what are the core criteria, what are the core things that are required for your particular audience. Have a list of questions. They're usually like maybe 10 questions long, really short surveys. It shouldn't take any more than maybe like 3 minutes to complete. So put a survey together to recruit users. A great way to send that survey out, use Google Forms. Everyone familiar with Google Forms? It's the best tool, use that. Send that out through like your social media channels. Facebook is a great one. You could try to recruit through like Craigslist if you wanted to. That's totally a perfect valid way to do it. But recruit, and screen. Don't get people that you shouldn't be speaking to. So that's going to be the first thing. You're going to get maybe like, I don't know, I've seen people get like through social media alone, 50 hits, 60 hits. Out of those 50 or 60 people, you're not going to want to speak to all those people. You're probably only going to find like, you know, I don't know, 10, 15, maybe 20 people that you're going to want to actually speak to. Once you have those people, schedule the interviews with those people. Yeah, what I definitely want to avoid is having you guys like interview 100 people for the sake of interviewing 100 people. Quality is better than quantity in this. Make sure that you get the right amount of people. The other thing that you can do is set up a survey outside of like a screening survey, but like a behavioral survey. So all those yes and no questions that you might have, totally valid to put into a survey and send that out. That gives you much wider reach. You can maybe get like, I don't know, a lot more people to answer those particular things. So that would be another thing. So you could do 2 surveys, a screener to narrow down the type of people you should be speaking to, and then a research survey that is going to have them answer a few questions that you want to be able to use. You'll be able to use that data to identify behaviors or patterns. And then do your interviews. If you can get 100 people that are qualified people, awesome. But if you can't, that's okay. I would say like definitely do more than 2. If you do 2 user interviews and we hang out next time, I'm going to be like, oh, come on, man. You want to try to get like at least 10 people. Cool? So I would say screener, at least interview 10 people. Aim for 100 is great. Get surveys out. You want a decent amount of response to surveys, but sometimes you can't go through that. Surveys, you don't want them to take any more than 10 minutes. Don't make them really long. And then go spend time. Do a contextual inquiry. If you can make connections with people that use the thing that you're using, that's called a contextual inquiry. So go direct to the source, find people, and spend time with them. So I think what would be great for you guys would be have a mix of surveys, a mix of user interviews, and a mix of contextual inquiries. Contextual inquiries will be on site. That would be awesome to come back with. Cool? Okay. Any questions?
I have a question. So you say it's a combination. We're doing one-on-one.
Yes.
interview. I know there's a lot of groups in LinkedIn.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be a great one.
You share something out. That's a survey.
Yeah. So there's 2 types of surveys. There's a screener survey, which is I'm going to send something out on LinkedIn, and I want to find out how many people fit the criteria of the people I want to speak to. And then maybe 100 people will respond to that. And based on their answers, you'll say, great, out of these 100 people, I want to speak to 30 of these people. Then you're going to reach out to 30 people, and not everyone's going to respond to you. Only like, I don't know, 5% or 10% are going to respond to you to actually do an interview. They'll take those people and actually do an in-person interview with.
But can I skip the screening if I know there's a particular?
100%, yes.
Okay, but there's a particular group that just deal with storm systems.
Yeah, you don't need to screen. That's already a qualified group. No need to, then just reach out and ask them if you can interview them. Or you can reach out to that group and do an actual research survey. So a research survey might look like, how often do you clear out your drains? Please give me a number. Do you clear out your drains? Yes, no. Do you have a problem with clearing out drains? Yes, no. Like asking a bunch of different behavioral questions that you can send out to that particular group. So if you can reach a qualified group, no need to screen them out.
Okay, but the question that I have is, let's say I know this group, because I belong to that group now. Should I tell them the reason that I'm doing this survey based on my pattern and I want to see your reaction, or just forget about that and just?
There should be a setup in the survey, which is, I would keep it pretty open. So I'm conducting some research to understand people's behaviors around draining systems. I'd love to hear some about, a little bit about your experiences.
I don't have to do anything. You got the answers.
Yeah. And you go through it. So that would be one example. So you don't want to say, hey, I'm working on this product and I want to really make it successful. Can you please tell me some stuff? Because it's, you want to just like not have them feel really pressured about answering you. So just have it be like, just tell me about your experiences. No stakes. Just like, I'd love to hear about it. Cool.
So reiterating, I could do just two things, right? The 10 people interview, and the rest.
10 to 100. If you have
At
access to
least.
LinkedIn group, then you
No,
can
no,
get
I
a
have
lot
a
more
lot,
than
I have
10.
a lot.
Yeah.
I have a lot.
Then get it up there. So I would do like. I would do, for your instance, I would do user interviews and I would do contextual inquiries. Find out if you can go to their place of business and understand what they're doing. And that's what all of you should be doing. Cool. Okay. I wish we could hang out for another hour.